Hello, in this video I aim to give you a bit of an overview of the game Operation Theseus, based around the Gazala battles. Operation Theseus was the German-Italian name for this operation. 1942, Second World War, and here is the box. It is produced by VUCA Simulations, which is a relatively new company, and you can see they're producing some beautiful looking games. Now, I was actually asked if I would review this, and the copy was sent to me by VUCA Games because previously I had made a video on Triumphant Fox, which is the same battle by the same designer, and it's not the same game, but essentially it is a kind of re-implementation of that previous game. The situation's the same, the map is more or less the same, it covers the same area, it's about the same size, the units are all the same, the basic system is the same, and in fact I think the only main difference I have found apart from the outstanding components, I mean they were very good before in Triumphant Fox, but Triumphant Fox is a game from the 90s, so nothing like what we have produced here. Apart from the components, the basic game is exactly the same, except for something extra in the combat system, which adds a whole new bit of spice to it. So in this video I aim to give you a bit of an overview of the game and what it's about. I hope not to take too long. I hope to give you enough of an idea of it. So I'm not going to go into all the play aids and so forth in depth. I want to mention things in passing. It's not like an unboxing video, and it's not going to be a gameplay video, it's just an overview. But the first thing to notice is that you get, apart from the very beautiful components of the map and the chips, is you get 4 play aids, which basically means each player has 2 play aids, and you essentially have everything you want on it. And the wonderful thing about this is, so you've got your combat results table, you've got your terrain effects chart, and sorry, where are we? Got player aid A, player aid B, and yes, and then you've got your sequence of play, your action points, enemy minefield operations and stacking limits, action point costs. But then on the back, so all of that is essential information. So stacking, that's very important, it's quickly summarised here. Action point costs, so combat is a function of movement, so you get a certain number of action points, spend 1 for movement, 2 to breach a minefield, 1 to refit, that's essentially to sort of recover from disruption, or you can improve your defence, and then you can enter an attack, and then you can escalate the attack. So there's essentially 5 actions which every unit or stack performs. So that's listed there, that what you can have in your stack is listed there. The action points that you gain are worked out on this according to, if you, at the start of your turn that you're going to be starting with one of these higher numbers and you roll the die, that's the number of action points you get. And say if you started with 7, you roll, you get that, then, and you move your marker down to 6. So the next time you activate that formation, you get slightly less. The chances of higher numbers are less, and the chances of lower numbers are increasing. So yeah, sequence of play, and then minefields are very important. So how the minefields are entered and breached, which are 2 different actions, are listed on the back of the on one of these charts. And then on the back of that one you have Schwerpunkt marker effects, breach minefield effects, disruption effects, isolation effects, supply pass, command range, etc., etc. And this is wonderful because these are, and then let you have this, So this is everything that I need in player aids. Often you get a player aid and they don't bother to do something on the back, or they do something on the back and it sort of gives you something but not everything. And this really touches on everything that is going to come up in the game, and just gives you brief reminders and summaries of it. So you have command and supply, headquarters, combat units or independent units, how command affects them or doesn't, how supply affects them or doesn't. And it's all in there. And if you forget, what's the effect of isolation, what's the effect of disruption, it's all on there. Normally I find myself diving in the rule book to check that, because I can never remember it playing so many games, but it's all there. Then not only that, on the back of the other one is the combat sequence. So you have the combat sequence there. You reminded how to do retreat before combat, how the combined arms bonus worked out. Here's all the combat DRMs. You have support from other units and adjacent hex, headquarters. You check for armor superiority, a comparison between the opposing forces if you have your punk, or if you fail to retreat. It's all there. Then a little chart to remind you how to check armor superiority, because you have tank points and anti-tank points. How do they compare and work out? And then a reminder of how flak bonus for the German 88s, very important in these desert battles, how they work out for the attacker or the defender. And so with these 2 each per player play aids, I find I can play a turn and I don't check the rule book. It's all there. I just need those reminders, and it's fantastic. But that's not all. The other thing is that you have your combat results table, and it's got this this thing that's quite familiar. Okay, in clear terrain, 1-to-1 is this column, but if it's broken or village, 1-to-1 is less. Great for the attacker. A hill, it's even less. Great, and so forth, all the way down to those all important minefields and boxes and Tobruk. You have a D10, and you can have modifiers up to 12, plus 12 dice roll modifiers. So, but I guess 20 is just the maximum you're going to be able to add up to. So that's a lot on there, and you could get lost running your finger down. Not anymore. So they've taken out this part, and now you have it as a player aid to slide it along. So say you're on, this column because you're in clear, or you're on this column because you're on a hill. It's there, and you have it, and then you can just see straight away without your eye wandering and losing it. So you don't waste any time trying, making sure you've read the combat results table right. It's just straight there in front of you. And that in itself is just a wonderful addition. It's the thing that makes me think that VUCA games, and perhaps the designer as well, they just really considered the player of the game. It's also in other ways. In this, you have an improved defence, so each side can improve their defences, but often you will have an improved defence chit, and then you put them down, and on the map you're like, okay, so he's improved defence, but is he Axis or Allied? Not with this game. On the back that's for the Allied side, that's for the Axis side, and that colour coding continues through. So the DRM, Allied, Axis, etc., etc. So who controls Tobruk? So it's all this kind of colour coding. It's just very simple. Who's got the luck chit, which means you can re-roll a roll, make your opponent re-roll a roll, etc., etc. So just little details like that show you that the producers have really thought about the player, because all I've often sworn like, oh, why didn't they produce say for example improved defence for the one side and then improved defence in a different colour for the other side, so I can tell at a glance who's who and what's what. Those lessons have been learnt, and we're reaping the benefits of them with the modern production of games, at least with this producer in this game. So that is wonderful. Then and it's not only that. You have on the outside, you have all the tracks you need. Again, you have stacking summarized. You have independent formations, and you have the formations independent units, and you have little markers so you can see who they are assigned to. So if you want to adjust it from turn to turn, you just slide it along. Again, at a glance you can see what's what. Then you have your formation markers, so they start here, activate, go down, and then the action points track, so you keep a run total. So that's for the axis, there it is for the allies. But imagine you're playing it solo. It's a bit annoying. There's the axis, there's the allied. How are you going to... here's the game turn track. It's so you're kind of reaching of which side do I sit, where do I look? Ta-da! It's all been put on here. The axis and the allies and the game turn track and a summary of reinforcements and the turns they come in on. So all those tracks on the outside around the board have been reproduced in that player aid. So you don't need anything on the back because you're going to be using that. And I did, and it was very wonderful. Again, thinking about the player, so it's not just the sort of production of a game and biff bang bong send it out there, but actually considering those little points that assist the player and make the game experience that much better. I always find something extra I can do though. One thing I did is you have to, due to the combat system, you can get, you might have, say, units with 8 points of strength and then multiplying by 3 for combat. And so you have to do multiplications to make calculations, and I just use these to say, okay, so the attacker's on 53 and the defender, what were they on? So I've calculated the attacker, then I go and calculate the defender and put theirs in, so to remind me, so I don't forget, what the attacker's number was while I'm working out the defender's odds. So that is all there, and you get the DRMs are tracked on here, and you even get little sort of DRMs for attacker support, and you get a marker for the attacker's hex, marker for the defender's hex if you want to take your units off and look at them and remember where the hex was. So again, it's breaking down the DRM chits into different sets of the DRMs can help you to, in your calculation of the DRMs and so forth. So any of that kind of fiddliness and potential sort of slowing down points of the game have been thought about here, it seems, and taken into consideration, and some implementation made of them. For example, the victory point hexes have a little marker, and it reminds you 1 victory point or 0 victory points if that headquarters is not in supply, and some of them are turn dependent, and so for example to Brook, if you get there within 1 to 4 turns you get 10 points if your headquarters is in supply, and in 5 to 6 turns you only get 7 points, and so forth. So that's there. So again, you don't have to sort of scratch your head and remember and look at the rulebook or look somewhere on the play aid. It's just straight away there if you want to check and remind yourself where you're standing for victory points. Of course, that being said, I still like even greater visual markers, so I put these down to remind me what's what. You also get markers to remind you some units cannot activate in certain game turns. So, for example, the units of the 2nd South African, they have no activation on game turn 1 or 2, unless, and there's a reminder on the back, blah, blah, blah. So, it's really helpful. You can see at a glance who can move, who can't, and you're reminded of the exceptions. Again, I just help myself a little bit. If the axes come within 3 hexes of this unit, you can activate those South Africans, and so that's just a reminder for me of that. So the rule book itself is beautiful. It's glossy paper. Some don't like that because they like to write in rules, which is generally what I do. I didn't find myself needing to write anything in here to clarify. I haven't found any errors, except one thing is no, it wasn't an error. It was just play aid clarified for me what it meant. There's examples given, so examples of dice roll modifiers for attack, minefield check and breach examples, whole page of that. So the rules are kind of they look fairly copious, but the games, and there's a comprehensive index at the back. There's some players' notes and historical notes. So the rulebook's very comprehensive. It looks like there's quite a lot in it, but I think that's just because it's very clearly explained. It's very well laid out. It's all there, and I didn't find anything difficult to find. What with the index, as I was learning, and my first learning games was or first learning turns was looking things up. So as far as the production goes, I think this is outstanding, and there's very little more you could ask for in those terms. There's even in the new thing that the game features over the Triumphant Fox old iteration of this battle by the same designer, Blennemann, are these, and these are, maybe if I'll jump straight to them. Well, just a little bit of background. So what is the game about? Yeah, sorry, what I just wanted to say before I forget about these is these add multipliers in combat, and they've been the curve of their distribution has been considered a certain way, but it's not just a sort of natural distribution, but some extra chits have been added into the game, and if you want just a completely random natural distribution of those multipliers, you can do that yourself. So that's a nice extra thought to have your choice whether to go with the designer's multipliers or just a straight linear distribution. But anyway, so how does the game play for people not familiar with Triumphant Fox? Essentially, you can see where we are now is at the middle of, at the end of game turn 3, out of 8 game turns, there's a scenario that goes halfway for 4 game turns. And there's also a learning scenario, which is just 1 game turn of the Italian Ariete division attacking Bir Hachim in command of the Free French allied units. So apart from that learning, that just sort of gives you an idea of the combat system and a little bit, and minefields and boxes, how they're moved into and breached. Apart from that, you have either a 4-turn game or an 8-turn game. With the 4-turn, so the situation is you have the desert here, there's the sea, you have Tobruk here, and the Axis are here, they're trying to move that way, and the Allies are here and trying to stop them. The Axis, the Allies have set up a system of minefields and defences called boxes. Boxes are essentially positions like this, Bir Hachim, where they have all-round defence. So they're kind of outposts placed with supplies and units and defensive positions in the desert, so that they can sort of withstand, siege for a number of days or so. And essentially the point being that this is such vast territory, you can't cover the whole line with all your troops, so you have position, box, box, box. So these strong outposts, and then more manoeuvrable forces around the back here, so that, you know, if say this point is being attacked, you can move around there. Now this is the extent of the British minefield and box positions. So the Axis mass, essentially mostly Italian units here, elite Italians here, and then the Desert Corps up here, ready to leap around and head for Tobruk, and essentially looking to engulf and capture a whole load of Allied units, and or create the disintegration of the whole Allied line, so it withdraws back that way. So it's not an I go, you go. So this game works in the fashion that units have an activation. You mark them on the activation track. So the German units start generally at 7. The Italians not so sort of mobile and command sort of efficient, so they start at 5 and 4. And the Allies again have a carefully thought out distribution of the sort of efficiency and ability to react of their units, of their formations I should say, and so they're marked on here. And then what happens is you roll for initiative. On the first turn of the game, the Germans are generally going to be getting it more often than the Allies. Otherwise it generally sort of flips flat back and forth between each one. But anyway, whoever gets initiative, you then roll on that table I showed you before for the activation points. And even if you have best activation level, on a die roll of 1 you're only going to get 1 action point, but on a die roll of 10, well, 7 to 10, you're going to get the maximum of 7. And then it decreases all the way down, so that at 4 it's even spread, and then down here most of you can still get the maximum if you're lucky, but most of your results are going to be 1 or 2, maybe 3. So say you get 7 action points, you take your action points, and then you say you are your formation is the 90th Africa Corps. You get the headquarters, you check for units that are in command, units in command according to the command range there. So if they're 7 hexes away, blocked by the usual things, zones of control and so forth, then they're free to go. If they're out of command, they can move and create hasty attacks. Hasty attack is just a standard attack. You can then go to improved attack, or regular attack, or prepared attack, and they give extra benefits on your DRMs depending on who and what you've got, and combat support from your headquarters. So if you're out of command range, you can still maneuver, and you can still create do hasty attacks. Probably, you know, if you have greater force against a much smaller force, you might have a decent chance of success. Otherwise, they're really just sort of spoiling attacks. And then you spend your action points: 1 point to move, 2 to breach a minefield, and 1 to initiate an attack. If you say move this fellow over here next to, so that's 1 action point, goes down, then you can say, okay, we're initiating an attack, and now this fellow can decide, am I going to retreat before combat? If he has a reconnaissance unit, or if he's being attacked by just infantry and he's motorised, he can attempt to retreat before combat. There's a dice off with some modifiers, or he can stay. If he stays, then the attacker can now decide, okay, will I keep it as a hasty attack, or will I escalate it 1 or 2 points to regular or prepared? If it's prepared, the German can start bringing in air assets and so forth, and if you're still within command range, you can bring in the attack support, that yellow modifier, off your headquarters. So that would be 1 to move, 2 to start the attack. Say they stay, that's 3. Then we perform the attack, and maybe they take a loss, move back 1 hex, they take 1 point of loss, move back 1 hex, they decide not to hold, and then if he's a if this is the victor, then they get free action point, so perhaps move in, and then you could even continue your attack if you have more action points. But then all the other units of the 90th are not going to get to go. So you have to kind of, it's a constant juggle between do you press the action that is going on, or do you bring in more for reinforcements, and then there's the possibility of your opponent reacting. So then you've spent all your action points and you roll for initiative again. Now whoever lost the initiative the last turn gets an automatic +2 on their die roll. So you roll down that the winner gets the initiative. If you lost it, you get +2. And if you lose it again, you get +4. If you lose it again, +3. So you can see, even though one side might keep getting initiative, then the opponent's going to get an increasing chance to grab it back. On the first turn, the German gets +3 on top of all these modifiers. So you can see they tend to keep the initiative longer than the Allied folk. And so then, similarly to the fact of do I activate one? I have activated formation. Do I keep activating the same stack to continue its movement? So you could potentially spend all of formation's activation moving a unit all around the board, before it stops when it enters a zone of control, and or attacking with it, unless they get disrupted. If you're disrupted, there's no movement and attack. So similarly to that, you can do the same with your initiative. So say the German wins the initiative again, they can choose to activate. Now that 90 has gone down from 7 to 6. You can choose to activate the 90th again. So then you roll, you get the action points. Maybe it's not quite as many as last time. Then they go down to 5. Then maybe the Allied player gets a turn. Then it's the German initiative again. Do you activate the 90th again pressing the attack just with them, or do you activate a different formation, bring them in to support, or use them to kind of pressure the enemy somewhere else? And so what it means is you get a very fluid and kind of hectic battle situation. It seems really appropriate, especially for the desert, because you have these wide open spaces, and a unit, even though it can be out of the immediate command range of its headquarters, it can still operate at up to 21 hexes of without being isolated. So it costs double to move it, but with what that means, you can create wide flanking maneuvers. Your forces won't have so much reactive ability once they've finished their turn, but it could mean it calls on your opponent to make a big shifting maneuver or something like that. And what it means is, if say you keep activating the same formation, you could move its units, move its units, move its units. You're getting less activation points each turn, so it's sort of getting its ability to move and attack, so forth, is diminishing each turn. But you could potentially go a long way with one formation. And so then when the initiative goes back to the opponent, they have to decide, so there's a hole. Do I jump through that, or do I maybe move around to meet what's going on there? If, say, your opponent moves in to kind of try and cut off your supply because your formation's now all the way over here in a number of stacks, but then when the initiative next goes back to your opponent and you stuck your neck out to try and cut them off, then they might sort of move around behind you to try and cut you off. So you can see what it means is you get a very freewheeling kind of battle. You can just sort of move very conservatively, and you don't necessarily always want to spend all your action points. You don't necessarily always want to activate your units all the way up to the maximum ability. Because the other thing is say there's the 15th Panzer starts on activation level of 7, and then they activate the whole formation activates 7 times in the turn, then at the beginning of the next turn they get +4, so they only get back to 4. So they've used up a lot of fuel, a lot of supplies, a lot of ammunition, pushing their way further and further out from their supply chain, so their capability is diminished next turn. They're all, but because these are the sort of the core units, they always go up to +4. Some of the, like the Italian units, might only be +3 or +2, and it's similarly with the Allied units. The best one in them goes up to +5. The others are +2, +3, or 1 or 2 +4s. But so you see, you're left with a decision where to put your most effort at any one time, and sort of you can really push your opponent and beg them to respond in a way, and your opponent could sort of push back at you and put themselves in an awkward position. So then it's kind of like, almost like I could dare my opponent, okay, I'm out here and I'm about to jump on to a bunch of victory points, position or solidly threatening Tobruk, cutting off your supply lines. Here's the Allied supply lines. What are you going to do about it? So as the Allied, do you just sort of respond fairly conservatively, move around a bit, or do you thrust out? And if you do thrust out, then that you're inviting the Axis again then to respond. Well, do I then move into that, or do I sort of stick my neck out a bit more, and so forth? So you're having this lovely sort of responsive activation of from player to player as the game progresses on, and combined with that, I think I'll just move to the combat system, and then I'll leave it at that for now, so as not to take up too much time. Just showing you a bit of the graphics on the game pieces. The combat system is attritional, so if we look here, you can see this unit has 12 strength points. That's their quarters. Underneath it, again, there's an infantry unit with 8 strength points. So 6 strength points is the highest I think you get. Oh, there's one for 7 for the armoured. Then you have something like, where do we have a recon unit here. It's only 1, maybe 2 strength points. So the infantry have lots of strength points. The armours have a sort of middle range generally, and the recce units less. But then the German armoured, this is 7 and 6. The British, the Commonwealth, you've got 3, maybe 4. Some are 2, I think, strength points. So you can see there's some variation there. And then what happens with the combat is, say this is your result. Here at the top, the attacker takes 0 and the defender takes 4 hits and have to check for disruption. So here the attacker takes 1, the defender takes 2 hits, checks for disruption. Here both take 2 hits, no checks for disruption. Here the attacker's checking for disruption, takes 2 hits, and the defender takes 1, up to the reverse there. Now, when you take hits, you generally have an option, unless you can't retreat. You can take the first hit, then you check for disruption. If you're all disruption, you have to take the rest of the hits as retreats, and so you retreat away. If you're retreating through enemy zones, you take more hits because of that. Otherwise, you might just take 1 hit, or you could hold, and so take 1, 2, 3, possibly 4 hits at a go. So that means that this infantry unit from 12 will go down to 8, and you've got markers to place under them here. There's also on the website, you can download some sheets if you don't want to put markers under your units. It's not really that much of a bother, but you can do it that way if you like. So what that means is the attacks are not all or nothing, so they could move into attack. He takes 1 or 2 hits, say, and then he could move off and start another attack, take a few more hits, and maybe they retreat. Then he could move once more again, take a few more hits. So you can see he can still be effective, and your tank points or anti-tank points and your combat effectiveness, your sort of morale points, etc., so forth, are not affected by your strength. So you can still be very effective in giving tanks support, even though you only have a few tanks left, but you've become a very brittle unit. And so you find the infantry sort of, you're using your infantry to absorb the damage. Your tanks are more brittle, particularly on the Commonwealth Allied side, but they are the ones that are giving you the tank points, which give you combat DRMs over and above the anti-tank points. So for example, this tank unit, he's only a 3, he's a 6 tank points, versus if he was attacking this infantry with 3 anti-tank, that would be -3, +3, or -3 if he was attacker or defender. So it's just an easy differential like that. And you get bonuses for combined arms, so if you have tanks and infantry in the same hex. But what the attritional combat means, again, is that because it's not all or nothing, it is very manoeuvrable. It's not the matter that you move a unit into position, it either wins combat or it loses combat and disappears. And it doesn't, if it wins combat, there's not a sudden hole in the enemy line. The enemy's probably going to be retreating. They'll take some damage and then they'll retreat. The attacker might take some damage or none at all. Then they might press the attack, or they might move on. And so the units that I have, this little bit here is a loss, and they're all, I think, Allied units. So they do get lost, especially like the Free French who sit there and be Hakim and just take the beating. And then we had some Indian units here from the Commonwealth that was stuck there. They again took a beating. The other ones were the more brittle tank units that were used essentially to delay the Axis advance. But because of that attritional nature, the units stay in the game longer, and so again the manoeuvre and that that sort of daring and pushing and the freewheeling formation becomes a lot more important, because do I want to press the attack here, or do I want to pull back to fight another day and maybe move further around, or do I have to pull back and cover a hole that had opened up? And the hole opened up because maybe you pushed one of your formations forwards, hoping that that your opponent was not going to, if they got the initiative, move into the gap, or B, if you got or that you would just get the initiative immediately and so close that gap with another formation before your opponent could move into it. None of it's that certain sure, and it's that this is the twist, main twist or the only twist I've really found in this new iteration, apart from the beautifulized components, is the combat multipliers. So you saw you have that effectiveness rating 6 here and say 3 here. So if they are opposed in combat, you roll one of these you pull one of these combat multiplier chits out of a cup. They always go straight back in after the combat, so it's always the same amount and selection of them. Then you check, so if you're defending and your effectiveness rating's 3, then if you're disrupted, you're only going to multiply by 1. If you're in a regular defense, you multiply your strength points by 2. So if you had 8 strength points here, let's pull these out just to make it clearer. So now you're on 16 strength. If you're in a box or a minefield, or you have improved defense, then you can multiply it by 2. But it could potentially go on another chit with the same effectiveness rating of 3. You have a different set of numbers. Here it's actually worse. But another check that is, the tendency is that the multipliers are better on, you know, to the right hand side for the improved defense. Likewise for the attacker, it works the same way. Their effectiveness rating is 6. So we check this. If it's a hasty attack, it times by 1, and 2 or 3. So it's either times by 1, 2 or 3. And so 12 times 3, if it's a prepared attack, that's going to be 36 instead of 24. So that's the difference between, say, they were 16, so 24 versus 36. That's the difference between 3 to 2 or 2 to 1, which, you know, is a whole column on the combat results table. Then if, and obviously if, say, we had the tanks in, and so they're also 6 combat effectiveness, so they're also times 3, that's another 18, so now we're up another column already. So what these chits did, and this is what the designer says they are for, is you don't have a strength factor counting. So you can't look at your opponent or remember, right, I know he's got 8 strength, so I want 3 to 1, so I'll amass 36 strength points. I've got my basic attack column, I'll add my shifts and DRMs to that. No, this throws spanners in the works and surprises. It's, you know, if you prepare your attack, then you're going to generally have a better multiplier, but not always. And that is wonderful because, again, it adds to that freewheeling and sort of daring-do nature of this. Do I push the attack? Am I going to get lucky on that, or do I want to risk it? Or, you know, this is looking like a great attack. I'm going to take this, and then for some unforeseen swing, you lose the attack. Now, it works, though. That could sound really bad and just think, oh, that's too random and there's no, too chaotic and no real control over your attacks. But because of the attritional nature, it's not a do or die. So, that attack was halted. We took a loss and the defender didn't take any, or not as many as we were hoping. But just wait a bit longer and press it again. So, that the attritional nature of the combat, the force multipliers, irregularity of the attack, so you cannot calculate exactly what you're doing, and then the individual activations of forces, meaning, you know, so the ability to push the same formation or the same stack one time after another, or wait and allow for build up, allows a lot of maneuverability, fluidity, and immediate and exciting decisions in this game. And that is where it really blossoms. You have all these player aids and you know, wonderful visuals that really should tell you very quickly what's going on and where to find that little thing that you just needed to remember. Combined with the free-flowing and very sort of nimble nature of the movement and the combat, because of the attrition, you can move in and attack and come out again. It's not just all or nothing. Makes for a really exciting game, and the situation in itself just adds to that. And the last thing I should say is about the situation, because essentially if so, the Axis is looking to take Bir Hakim, El Adem, and then Knightsbridge here. If you take those, you are going to get a decent amount of victory in the 4-turn game, so the half size game. If you take those 3, then you have a victory. You might be able to take this, and then similarly, so if you get to that point halfway, then you set up for the full turn game, either to take Acroma here and that and get a victory, or if you can't take those, to go for Tobruk for 6 victory points and try and take that for a magnificent win. But the thing is that the Axis strength is here, You do have Italian units. They are held up by the minefields. They can be moved through, but it's very slow because you get a lot of disruption. Disruptions generally, especially with the sort of weaker units, aren't resolved till the end of the turn, and then you have to start again, try to clear the minefield. Maybe you get disrupted, maybe not. In the game I played, the Commonwealth, they retreated from their line here, which allowed these Italian units to move forwards and take this victory point here. So the Axis are standing at 4 victory points. They only need that and they're going to get a very nice victory. So it's all boiling down on the last turn of this halfway game to the battle for Knightsbridge. But yeah, so you have a main attack force here, and then you do have possibilities here, but it could be very stagnant along this line. For example, you know, the Allies could match the Axis, and the Axis have to. The Allies have the opportunity, if the Axis leave a hole here, the Allies could sort of zip through. They can move very quickly through their own minefields and take some victory points from one of the Allied supply routes. And especially the Axis have to control this because they have to burst through Bir Hakim and to allow the supply line to come here, and then potentially it could go all the way up here for them, from here over to here, which allows their headquarters to remain supplied, which allows them to command the units in their formation more effectively. So the Allied do have a chance to move through and threaten the Germans. So the Germans, they have to keep some back steps, but they also might want to sort of try and, they also kind of need to keep the pressure up, or else the British could just withdraw all those troops and, you know, use them in the defence around here. So it's a very nice situation, and it's quite interesting in the way that this can be sort of a standoff for a long time. You know, that the Axis are like, I don't want to push forwards because we're probably going to get eaten up in the minefields, at least for some time, and that Commonwealth are kind of like, well, I need to hold them there, and I want to keep a force to threaten the German supplies, but you know, their spearhead is pounding through my back area around here and threatening to encircle me. So yeah, the Axis have to strike hard, fast and deep, and with the activation system they have the ability to do that, and it is a daring ability, but the Commonwealth, because of the attritional nature, they're going to take some beats, but they can move back, you know, and live to fight another day. So then they have to be careful and think hard and respond intelligently to the thrust of the German, and try and double guess them. You know, are they lunging, run around for Tobruk, so I'll leave a hefty force here to strike through, cut off their supply, or are they actually just building up to slice into me at Knightsbridge, in which case I might want to start carefully organising my defence, utilising the ridges, you know, for the terrain to my advantage. Great game. I recommend it. I love the original, and this one is just, you know, stacks better with the modern production quality and that extra twist with the combat variability, meaning the excitement and the excitement and the responsivity is increased, rather than the kind of dry factor counting. And so even as the defender, you're asked to make some risky moves and some calculations of which you cannot fully discover the risk in it. And I think that would better simulates the situation in which the commanders and the command in a battle such as this found themselves. So it evokes, I believe, that this situation of this battle extremely well.